Welcome back, Weirders and Weirboos, to the channel Double Doge, where today I'm going to be talking about some of the most underrated items in Stadium. For those of you who don't know, while I'm in and out with Stadium, I definitely play a bit more of the base game. I play both modes. I have been All-Star before in Stadium. I admit I haven't hard committed to it enough to get Legend before, but I'm thinking of going for that this season. I've already got good progress. I've gotten to High Pro so far on DPS, and I'm on my way up. And I'm at Elite on the other roles. Obviously it's a bit hard because Stadium games just go on forever. And when you've got 3 roles to cover, it takes a while to rank up. Either way, I do not use any pre-made builds. I always make up my own builds because that's the whole fun of Stadium for me, and that means I've experimented with a lot of items that people don't tend to use. For the sake of keeping this video broadly applicable, and also because it would be a headache otherwise, I am not including any hero-specific items in this list, although I'm sure there are some underrated ones. I want this to be broadly applicable to people even if they don't play the characters that I'm talking about, so we're using only items that everyone can use. And believe it or not, that already actually gives us plenty to work with. Genuinely, there are so many items in Stadium that have so much utility that no one ever uses. So much so, in fact, I'm just going to hit you with like a quick kind of cop-out honourable mention to begin with. This isn't any one specific item, but for those of you who do follow builds, I just want to express to you the value of being able to freestyle a little bit. Especially when you just have a build where, like, right now all you need to do is spend your money on getting attack speed and weapon power. Or maybe if it's an ability-based build, ability power and cooldown reduction. If that is the case, and the items that the build is suggesting to you are either not affordable or you could buy them but it would be an inefficient use of your money, please just freestyle it. For example, if I have no idea how much money you have right now and I'm just trying to make a generic build that focuses weapon power on almost any character, I probably would recommend that you take Talon Modification Module, because it's 15% weapon power. It's the most you can get in the rare category, assuming you can't afford an epic yet. And let's say the other item that I had in the build was Icy Coolant, because that's a 10% boost with some cooldown reduction, which is also pretty nice. That's not necessarily a bad thing to put in a build, but say you go to the next round and it turns out that you have 11,000 credits to spare. Well, uh-oh, you're 500 off being able to buy this item and this item. You can't afford these. You don't want to just buy one of them and then move on. That's a terrible use of your money. So here's an example of what freestyling could look like. If I've got a budget of 11,000 credits, let's say, first of all, let's start with taking a bunch of common items, because they are far more cost efficient in every case. The only reason why you would take anything that isn't a common is either you've run out of commons to buy that would buff the stats you want, or you've run out of item slots and so you need higher quality items. But whenever you have spare item slots, you should definitely be spamming commons rather than buying more expensive items for the most part. So we could take Compensator, Plasma Converter and Weapon Grease, and there we go, 3,000 credits spent and a decent amount of stat boosts already. Then we could also take Aftermarket Firing Pin so that we can get a 5% move speed boost alongside a 10% attack speed boost. And finally we could take Advanced Nanobiotics, which is a 5% weapon power boost that also gives a 10% attack speed boost if you have healed an ally. And that lasts for 3 seconds, and it does apply to Lifesteal, which we just bought Lifesteal for 1,000 credits. You add all this up, and bear in mind that we actually have 10% more attack speed than this, because the second we lifesteal, it'll go up to 25%. And we now have a situation where we have a 10% damage boost stacked on top of a 25% damage boost for a total of a 37.5% DPS boost alongside 10% lifesteal alongside a 5% movement speed boost, as opposed to just 15% weapon power. We have more than doubled the amount of DPS boost that we have gotten with the same amount of money, while also getting more lifesteal and more move speed to boot. So yes, I understand this isn't a specific one item, but I wanted to start with that honourable mention just generally to the concept of, especially when it comes to optimising your DPS with just pure attack speed and weapon power, freestyling and mixing and matching whatever costs fit the best, rather than just following the build to a T. Again, it becomes a lot more difficult to do that if you're starting to work with synergies and special abilities, but when it comes to hard stats, there's a lot more room for you to freestyle and make it up on the spot. With that, we can get into the first real ranking, which for me, I think would have to be Exo Springs at number 10. And I think that's a fitting selection for number 10, because to be fair, when I say Exo Springs is underrated, I'm not here to tell you it's broken or anything. It's not going to blow you away. That being said, I just have to be real with you. I have never seen a single person ever take this item, and I'm going to be honest with you, when I've taken this item, at least in situations where it makes sense, I have found it to be pretty good, honestly. So all it does is it gives you basically Baptiste Exo Boots on anyone you want, but with a 15-second cooldown. It also provides a 25%, not 25%, 25-point boost to your health bar. So obviously on a tank like Ramatra, you're probably not noticing much of a difference. But obviously if I was playing someone like Tracer, or if I was playing someone like Genji, you would have a much more noticeable improvement to your health pool from that. So yeah, the main reason why I think this item is kind of underrated is because there's a lot of tanks in Stadium that are really good at just brawling on point that have no high ground access. Take, for example, an Orisa. So you could play Orisa, and you could be, like, obviously a devastating force on point, and you could be almost impossible to challenge, but then there can just be, like, a Cass up here. Just bam, 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 bam. And, like, sure, you can shoot back a bit, but, like, you can't reach him. He's just up there poking you, making your life hard, and you can't do anything about that until suddenly I bought the wrong gadget. My bad. Force of habit. Boom. And I know this might look crazy, but especially considering no one picks this item, it means no one expects it either. You'd be surprised how many times people just stand in front of me as I'm like a tank like Orisa or Reinhardt and Ramatra, and they think I can't reach them because obviously I don't have high ground access normally, and they haven't checked my items, they don't know I have this, and then they're like, why are they walking at me? What? They're an idiot, they can't get me. And then suddenly, boom, hello, jump scare, you're dead. It's obviously a little bit memey, I won't lie, but I mean, it gets the job done. Again, I mostly recommend this on characters that struggle to access high ground, obviously. I mean, that's kind of a given, but still. But even just as a movement mix-up, it can still sometimes be pretty useful. I've been surprised the amount of times I've been able to use it in combat to actually pretty decent effect. Like, it actually sends you high enough that if someone's hiding behind a wall, it's relatively common that you can just jump high enough into the air that you can kill them while they're hiding behind the wall. Kind of like Freya Updraft, where you can actually invalidate pieces of cover sometimes with the height boost. Only for a second, but if you only need a second, then that'll do it, you know? As well as that, just generally, it's a movement mix-up that people don't usually see coming that makes it easier to dodge their attacks. However, I have to mention, before I get off of this item, a certain synergy that Wu Yang has with it. You see, Wu Yang has a power, for those of you who don't already know, there it is, Puddle Stomp, which makes it so that when you jump from this, you do a little splash that can AoE heal people. It's a cute little bit of bonus healing. Now, don't get me wrong, again, this is slightly memey, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind. This, in fact, does synergize with Exo Boots, and you're about to see some absolutely ridiculous garbage. Yeah, you can just jump that high. 122 healing. About triple the amount we were getting before because we got that much height. So, yes, you can be, like, flying Wu Yang, I guess, and just like, I'm going to the skybox, goodbye. So yeah, if you ever want to play Wu Yang with rollouts, there you go. I mean, you don't even necessarily need the power. Obviously the power's a cool thing, but you could just do this literally just for mobility. You could just, like, become the flying Wu Yang. Maybe you with a little weapon power build and where you're a bit more deadly. It could genuinely be worth it. Next up is an item I really think has gone under people's radars, and the only reason it isn't high on this list is because I recognise it is difficult to use correctly. I recognise that in a bad scenario it will be near useless if you don't make good use of it, and I recognise that not everyone can use it. However, if you are playing a character that can use this item and you use it well, it is actually ridiculous, and I feel like a lot of people don't really see how. I only really recommend this item on flanking characters that have relatively small health bars to begin with. I would not take it on a tank, I would not take it on a hit scan, I would not take it on most supports. I would mostly recommend taking this item on Genji, Tracer, Vendetta, Pharah if you're playing that kind of playstyle, or maybe Moira. At a stretch, you could maybe do it on Kiriko or Lucio, but I imagine that you would mostly want to stick to those 5 characters I laid out. Now, what item might that be? It's Electrolytes. An item that half of you probably forgot existed, even though it's literally the first item on the menu, considering no one ever uses it. It is a 1000 cost survivability item that I think was already kind of underrated before it received multiple buffs, and ever since, I feel like I'm the only person on the planet that actually uses this item. It simply gives you plus 10 health on your health bar, which isn't a great deal compared to these 1500 ones that give you 25, of course, but the main attraction is the effect. At the start of the round, and every single time you respawn, you gain 30% move speed for 10 seconds while out of combat, and that's not even the big part. The big part is you get 100 overhealth. Now, that is overhealth, which means it doesn't recover, and unfortunately in the practice range, this does not work, so you can see I don't have the overhealth in the practice range, but you would in a real game. Now, you might be thinking, okay, is that really that good, though? Because, like, you imagine yourself having 100 bonus health that doesn't come back, and you're like, okay, so I start walking up, the fight begins, like, you know, we're about to walk up to the front line, and then I get poked out, I lose a bunch of HP, and usually I would just get it healed back, but I can't get it healed back because it's overhealth and it's just gone, and there you go. I basically just used my 100 overhealth to walk up a little bit, and I didn't really achieve much with it. That sucks. I guess this item's terrible. But that's just the thing. If you are playing a flanker like Genji, Tracer, Vendetta, or depending on the playstyle, Pharah, you really shouldn't be getting poked out before the fight even begins. You ideally want to be arriving at your target before they've even had a chance to poke you out from a distance. So if you're playing these characters correctly in the first place, you will be taking very minimal damage before you're already arriving at an up-close duel with the target you want to kill. And that's just the thing. Imagine just for a moment you are the 250 HP Ana, and you are being forced to fight a 360 HP Genji. How do you think that one's gonna go? I mean, to be clear, if you're paying the same amount for this item than you are for Compensator for 5% weapon power, and let me just illustrate this. You will kill Ana 5% faster if you have Compensator, and that's a help. But for the same price with Electrolytes, you could make it so that Ana kills you 44% slower. Yes, I did the maths. So, we're talking, for the same price, you get a 44% edge in a fight. More than you would get off of Eye of the Spider, which is a 14,000 cost item. You get that much of an edge in your first duel by taking Electrolytes, when the alternative, and not even a bad alternative, is a 5% boost in the same duel for the same cost, which is about 9 times worse. Mathematically, this item is about 9 times more effective at getting you to win your first duel than the most powerful common items you would usually be taking at the start of the game. That is how insane it is to get an early Electrolyte pick. But then obviously the question becomes, okay, great, so you get one really one-sided fight, but what's the point of that? Because then after that, you're going to be super weak. All you've got is 10 HP for 1,000 credits. And don't get me wrong, that's a fair concern to have, but I think you need to understand the way this game works. If you are playing a flanker character in Overwatch, and you successfully win a duel in the backline, that creates space for your team. And when your team has space, it means they have angles. That provides your supports more defensible spots to play from, that provides your hit scan more, like, you know, juicy angles to fire from safely, where they can just farm the enemy tank. That makes it really, really, really easy for your team to snowball. Like, it is so important to make space with flankers by getting the first pick in the backline, or at least drawing attention and being a nuisance in the backline. And usually, the hardest part of playing a flanker is the first pick, because you're stuck in a situation... you're stuck in a situation where your whole team cannot do anything to help you, basically, because at the start of the game, you don't have angles, you don't have good positions to set your supports up on, your hit scans usually don't have the best positions to play from, at least not safely, and so as a result, the first fight, you're kind of having to go in there alone and take a lot of aggro with not a lot of advantages for the sake of trying to get that first little win. But then after that, it is so much easier to just keep going, because from there, you start to surround the enemies, from there, the enemies start to get cut off from their supports, or their supports might just be dead, you know? From there, the tank might start floundering on point because they're not getting as many heals. There are so many things that just collapse the second you get one good pick on the backline as a flanker. So the second you win the first fight, every other fight is dummy easy, and you do not need the extra health anymore. Not to mention, if you're playing a character like Genji, if you win a fight, you get a dash reset, because you got the kill. And if you get a dash reset, that gives you a significant advantage in terms of your cooldown trades, and that obviously gives you, you know, the ability to keep up the aggro way more than you would usually be able to and snowball off of it. So for Genji in particular, it's really, really good. It's definitely an item I love taking on Genji specifically in the early game. So yeah, Electrolytes is quite an underrated item. But do you want to know an item that is a bit of a different flavor of underrated? Because these first two I've been hitting you with are items that are basically never used, but I think are actually pretty good. But when I say pretty good, I acknowledge I'm not talking about they're insane. Like, you know, there's better items in the game. It's just that, you know, no one even uses these at all when they should probably at least use them a little. Here we have the polar opposite. We have an item that people actually do use a decent amount, but I feel like people misuse it and don't realize how good it is. Now, I say that as if I'm being judgmental. I'm going to be completely honest, this is one of the most recent quote-unquote discoveries, I guess, out of the items in this list. This is an item that I haven't really given a chance for the longest time and only recently decided to basically go out of my way to play a bunch of games trying to push it and get the most value out of it. And I think the biggest reason I kind of ignored it is because it doesn't really seem like a secret, super underrated item, because it's a very basic item and an item that you actually do see sometimes, just not maybe as much as you should. That being Plasma Converter, plus 10% weapon lifesteal for 1,000 credits, that simple. And you might be thinking, okay, what's so great about Plasma Converter? I mean, like, I'm not saying it's bad, people use it and all, but like, how is it being slept on? Okay, let me put it this way. It wouldn't be controversial of me to say that Phantasmic Flux is generally a pretty damn good item, right? I mean, it's been nerfed multiple times and it's still kind of a mainstay of a lot of builds. If we look at these numbers, Phantasmic Flux provides a 15% lifesteal boost to both weapon and ability lifesteal, and a 10% power boost to both as well, while granting the ability that you can lifesteal over your maximum health bar by up to 50 over health. This costs 10,000 credits. Now, especially if you have a build that's mostly focused on weapon power in the first place, like I'm not saying the AP isn't nice, but if you have a build where AP isn't really your focus, you're mostly focusing weapon power. This costs 10 times less and gives you almost the same amount of lifesteal. That's a really good deal. That's a really good deal. I'm not even saying Phantasmic Flux is bad. Phantasmic Flux is good, and it still has its place. Sometimes it's really important to be able to overheal with that lifesteal, and obviously only Phantasmic Flux can provide that. And obviously Phantasmic Flux has the benefit of also providing more damage as well as more lifesteal. And obviously, if you do want a build that's more well-rounded between ability damage and weapon damage, you would probably still take Phantasmic Flux. But if you're specializing in weapon power, then it really is a way better deal to take Plasma Converter if you're looking for cost efficiency. But I'm not even advocating for not using Phantasmic Flux and using Plasma Converter instead. What I'm advocating for is stacking them. You see, I feel like this is the big thing with weapon lifesteal that made me underrate it for so long. I never really stacked weapon lifesteal because it was already so expensive to get Phantasmic Flux, and then I looked at these other items, especially Techno Leech. I think on its own, Techno Leech is a pretty bad deal. In fact, I think I put it in one of my worst Stadium items videos as like an honorable mention or something, because of the fact it's so cost inefficient. Which is still true, by the way, technically speaking. Like, when it comes to lifesteal items, I recommend the order you buy them in. Like, okay, assuming you have the money, is you prioritize Phantasmic Flux first, but then you get Plasma Converter, and then you get Techno Leech just to, like, giga stack it, but you don't get Techno Leech unless you want to get literally every lifesteal option. Hell, even if you want to, in the gadget section, it's easy to forget, but Super Serum actually provides you with weapon lifesteal, so you could take Super Serum instead if you had the money for it, if you wanted a better item than Techno Leech to use. But yeah, the point I'm trying to get at here is if we take Phantasmic Flux and we take Plasma Converter, that is nearly doubling the lifesteal you are getting off of Phantasmic Flux for only 1,000 extra credits. That is a really good deal. Obviously, Techno Leech, not quite so good a deal, bit expensive, doesn't provide a big damage boost, only provides 10% weapon lifesteal for, you know, it's the same power as this in terms of just the lifesteal, the main thing you want, and it's 4.5 times more expensive. Not a great deal, but obviously, if you are just trying to hard stack weapon lifesteal, you would still take it. But still, after all this, you might be thinking, okay, but why do I want to hard stack it in the first place? What's so great about having lots of weapon lifesteal? Well, this is the thing. What's so good about Phantasmic Flux in the first place? The main reason Phantasmic Flux is super good, like, don't get me wrong, like, the stats aren't bad on it, but I don't actually think it's the stats that make Phantasmic Flux such a good item. I think it's the nature of Stadium. Stadium, unfortunately, kind of encourages people to stat farm like crazy. Like, you can genuinely be an amazing teammate in Stadium in terms of your ability to hold space, deal with flankers, just generally solve problems for your team and keep them protected, but if that doesn't translate to damage, kills, and healing on the scoreboard, then you are going to be getting absolute pennies for actually doing all that work. I can tell you from experience, because when I try and play Tracer in this mode, I actually do pretty well, and I really get to do a lot for my team, but as well as that, I also make, like, no money. Like, the amount of times I will be doing so well on Tracer, but then I will have, like, 10,000 less than the second lowest guy in the lobby, and I'm just like, my god, I just don't get to have money! So yeah, unfortunately, Stadium kind of encourages you to just play characters where you can stat pad like crazy, and lifesteal is a really good way to do it. So, to explain how lifesteal makes you a ton of money in Stadium, first of all, pretty obvious, it encourages you to deal damage, and dealing damage makes money. Great. It also heals you for dealing damage, and healing yourself, even if it's just yourself, makes money. So there's two ways of making money already. But then in fairness, you could argue, well, you could just get things that make you do more damage, and doing more damage makes you more money, right? Well, it does, so long as you're alive. But if you die in the middle of the fight, if the fight ends up being really explosive and it ends really quickly because you do so much damage but you're so weak because you're a glass cannon, like you're so not durable, then it means that there's a lot of downtime on that money making. Whereas if you're more focused on sustaining yourself in a fight, you can drag out a fight longer, and the longer the fight lasts, the more damage and healing will be traded between the two players, the more money you will make. Having lifesteal focused builds encourages you to be in never-ending team fights where you are always doing damage and basically never dying because you're always sustaining yourself by continuing to deal damage. It's just a really, really good way to make money. The main problem with it is when you only have 10 or 15% weapon lifesteal, it's just not a lot of healing. It doesn't really help you survive through all that much. But when you up it to this, I mean, that's more than a third of the damage you're doing turning into healing. Like, if you have a round where you deal about 6,000 damage, which is a pretty reasonable amount, especially for a tank like Ramatra as an example, in fact, you should probably get more than that in the late game, that if you have this much lifesteal, that means you've also healed yourself for more than 2,000 health. Like, you're starting to hit numbers you would expect from being an actual support character in terms of just self-healing on you. That's a lot of bonus money you're making. And if you have characters that have special items that allow them to lifesteal even harder, all the better. Here's a great example. First of all, let's go into the gadgets and get Super Serum to get this up to 45%, and then let's look at Ramatra's survival item, Caustic Exo Armor, which gives another plus 10% on both ability and weapon lifesteal, as well as giving plus 15 lifesteal to everything while in Nemesis form. We now have 55% weapon lifesteal, and we are going to have 70% lifesteal when we are in Nemesis form. So let's get an idea of what that looks like. Let's go to a Roadhog, and with the staff, okay, I don't know why the Roadhog isn't loading in, but you can see the amount of healing I'm getting there on the bottom left. How about with this rocket bot? Let's see the health bar shoot up. That's a lot of self-heal, and that's without any supports on me. That's just what I can do on my own. And that's without breaking out the Nemesis form for even more lifesteal on these punches, where you can just see the health bar just keeps going up. And I don't even have to, like, slow down or anything. I'm not even using Super Serum yet. You can use that to amp it even further. In fact, let's see what that looks like on the Roadhog, if I can even get there before the health regeneration kicks in. You just see my health bar, like... So, can you see why I think lifesteal stacking is kind of an underrated strategy? Like, I know people know Phantasmic Flux is good, but don't just stop at Phantasmic Flux. If you're playing a character that wants to lifesteal and do these really long sustained team fights, I really think you need to stack it, not just give up on it. So yeah. Now, a couple bonuses. First of all, let me just quickly talk about which characters I think really deserve to focus lifesteal. Ramatra is actually the best example, no joke. Like, from what I've played, I've had the most success with lifesteal Ramatra. Weapon power-based lifesteal Ramatra is currently my strongest build after they nerfed Ravenous Vortex, so I would recommend that personally. I've been doing really well with that build. I haven't lost a game with it yet. Orisa, Zarya, Sigma, Reinhardt, Junker Queen... Obviously not for weapon, but for ability lifesteal, Hazard, these are all characters that get a lot out of life. Even arguably Winston, depends, but yeah. No, Winston's probably pretty good with it as well. I actually haven't, it's been a bit since I played Winston. I should try that out with Winston. But yeah, the only ones I would think wouldn't be super great with it would be Doomfist or and D.Va, but even then, depending on the way you build them, maybe you could make that work. I think Weapon Lifesteal obviously also works with hit scans, especially the more slow but durable ones. I think it works with Torbjorn, I think it works with Junkrat, and I think it also works pretty well with Brigitte. Now, one last note before we move on. I know this has been a long category, but you might be wondering why I'm talking specifically about Weapon Lifesteal. Now, to be clear, there is nothing inherently wrong with ability lifesteal, and in fact, you actually have more options for ability lifesteal if you feel you have a character where you want to do ability lifesteal, because of the fact that you have both Energized Bracers and Skyline Nanites for ability lifesteal boosts, whereas in the weapon category, you only have Techno Leech in the rare category. The main issue, though, is the key word of the lifesteal strategy is sustain. You want whatever you're using to keep yourself alive with the lifesteal to be something you can be using repeatedly and often enough that you are never going to run out of health, and you could theoretically infinitely cycle what you're doing unless you take a ridiculous amount of burst. That becomes a problem because the whole idea of abilities is they tend to have cooldowns, and those cooldowns inherently create long periods where people could pretty easily burst kill you while you don't have the ability to lifesteal to keep yourself up. Obviously, there are always exceptions. If you have very low cooldown abilities, ability lifesteal becomes a much more feasible option, and if you're someone like Hazard, the war criminal of a character he has been until his recent nerf, you obviously especially like having ability lifesteal because your ability damage is mostly being done through spikes, which, let's be real, I mean, obviously it doesn't even have a cooldown, but it should have a resource meter, and it practically doesn't even have a resource meter if you build them correctly, at least not until this recent nerf, thank God. My God, just, I actually cannot believe that Hazard has been allowed to exist in the state he has been allowed to exist in Stadium for this long. Like, I'm sorry, I know this is a side tangent, but like, I've never seen, I think this is the single most obviously broken, stupid, overpowered character, like, I have seen since I came back to Overwatch in like 2022, and I kind of can't believe that he was left in this state for so long. Like, I experienced what it was like to play into and as this guy, and it was literally just you could jump inside the enemy backline 1v5 with no supports and you would kill 5 just for holding right click. Like, actually insane. But either way, those days are behind us now. Thank God they nerfed him. Don't know why it took him so long, but we're here. Back on topic. Yeah, if you can find characters that have very high uptime on their ability-based damage, then feel free to take ability lifesteal. And hell, even if you can't find that, if you find a scenario where you think ability lifesteal will be good, even though it won't have lots of uptime, then sure, knock yourself out. It's just, obviously, usually you want this more sustained, continuous pressure, continuous self-heal, which obviously means that usually weapon lifesteal is the better option. Up to you. Oh, next is a funny one. Okay, I have seen a couple people use this item, but I have basically exclusively seen people use this item to meme when I unironically think it has some pretty good applications. Colossus Core. Colossus Core is a epic gadget that gives you 50 armor, 40% knockback resistance, 40% slow resistance, and the activated ability to make you giant. While you are giant, you are immune to all forms of CC, and you have 25% damage reduction, as well as a 25% bonus to your health bar, which is a lot of extra survivability. The downside being that not only are you larger, which means you're easier to shoot, but also you deal 25% reduced damage and healing for those 5 seconds. So, you might be wondering, okay, how do you use this then? I mean, don't get me wrong, you saw, like, in the trailer back when they added gadgets, you saw people use it on Reinhardt, so they just kind of showed it as an example of, hey, Reinhardt players, don't you hate it when you try and walk in, but, like, you just take too much damage? Well, imagine you try and walk in, and the Orisa tries to spear you, and you just go, raw, I don't care, boom, 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 boom! That's kind of the idea, I guess. And to be clear, that's not, like, a bad usage of it, but it is usually a little bit underwhelming for the cost if that's what you're going to use it for. It depends. It can be decent to just use it for that. Up to you. Trust your own judgment on that front. But when I'm talking about using this item, I don't mean that. Especially because, of course, the downtime problem. Like, it is, for every 30 seconds, you have it for 5 out of 30 seconds. That's not terrible, but it is low enough that, obviously, you don't want to really be relying on this as a crutch. This wants to be something where you have a crucial moment in a game where you need this effect, and you only activate it when you need it. So, keeping that in mind, when would you want this effect? Well, let me just immediately hit you with the funniest reason, and unironically, a very powerful reason in my opinion. Oh, they removed a power. I'm not sure which one they removed. Okay, I'm Cass, and I want to high noon, and you might have made a high noon build, you might not have. You can still do this even if you're not necessarily doing a high noon build, although, you know, it's better if you do a high noon build. But, you know, I'm playing Cass, and oh no, even though I've got really powerful high noons, the enemy team has an Orisa. And just to be clear, usually when I make up these examples, I'm just kind of making up good examples. In this case, this is something that's actually happened to me more than once. It's like, I've had games where this exact situation has happened. So, like, hey, I'm doing this high noon spam build, and it's super powerful if I can get it off, but the main problem is, I've got an Orisa that knows what I want to do. And this Orisa is just running at me and spearing me on cooldown. And so, when the hell am I going to high noon? Because the Orisa's never going to die. They've got like 5 million HP and they're regenerating 5 billion a second. Like, that Orisa's going to be alive the whole team fight. And I can only end the team fight if I can get off a high noon without being speared. But how am I supposed to not get speared when they have cooldown reduction and they're basically saving all their spears for me because they know they need to spear me to cancel my high noon? Well, you know what? Want to know what you do? This entire time, I am completely CC immune. If an Orisa tries to spear me while I'm doing this, I just shrug it off and kill them anyway. And the best part is, because no one uses this item, a lot of people don't react to it. A lot of the times, the Orisas will actually walk into the high noon expecting it to end even while you're giant, because they don't immediately remember what this item does. Like, usually from what I've seen, they realize what happened afterwards, but in the moment, they're like, I don't know why the Cass is giant, I'm just gonna spear him, ah! Oh. Wait, what? What? Oh no! Oh no! And then they're just dead. They're just dead. Boom. Whole health bar gone. The best part about this as well is that, okay, you do have to be careful. You have to make sure that you press the Colossus Core before you ult, because it does actually cancel your ability to use gadgets while you're in high noon. So the first time I tried this, I did die because I didn't realize I couldn't activate Colossus Core mid-high noon. And so I got speared and died. But, you know, after that one mistake, I never made the mistake again. I learned my lesson. But yeah, another cool thing you can do is, one of the only downsides of this is obviously the 25% reduced damage. Now, in fairness, that obviously makes the high noon charge slower, but it also does mean that what you can do is you can activate it early, just use it normally for a couple seconds, and then activate high noon, and then get the skulls, and then boom! If you didn't notice, I got an instant 25% damage boost the second it ran out. So what you can often do is you can use it to tank the spear and then hold the high noon and wait until it wears off, so that as it wears off, it immediately cancels not only the damage resistance and the CC resistance, but also the damage reduction, so that you get the instant damage boost back and you do the full damage high noon while getting the benefits of being CC immune during the high noon. So yeah, Colossus Core, really, really good with Cass. Now, obviously if it was just Cass, I wouldn't use it for this video, because of course then it would be only one character. But I do think there are multiple characters for which this is useful. Cass is just the funniest example, and the most obvious example to use, but there's a lot more just chill examples that aren't really like super like breathtaking, but they are really good. A really good one, in particular in my opinion, is Genji. When you blade as Genji, what are the main things that make your blade not work? It's not usually that you can't kill things, especially in Stadium. Genji's ability to kill with blade is kind of insane. Like, his blade damage is ridiculous. So, usually damage is not a concern with Blade. The problem with Blade is one of two things. You either dash in, and you get hit with so much burst at once because everyone looks at you the second you ult, that the second you arrive, you just lose your entire health bar, and even if you've got a bunch of lifesteal, like, usually the way you counterplay this is you get a bunch of lifesteal, and to be fair, usually that'll work, but sometimes even that won't help, because lifesteal only helps you if you get a second to swing your sword and land a hit so you can actually heal off of it. But if you don't get that second to swing your sword, then, well, you just explode from full HP before you can even do anything. So obviously that invalidates the blade. As well as that, the other thing that can happen is you can kind of just get CC'd into oblivion. You know, you can go in with the blade, you can get booped out of position by a Lucio, into getting comboed by a flashbang from a cast, to then getting speared by an Orisa, and the second you're out of the spear stun lock, you get hit by a sleep dart from Ana, and you are just crying the entire time. And then you take Colossus Core, and the entire time you're using Blade, yeah, sure, you're doing 25% less damage, which isn't ideal, but you're also having a bigger health bar, taking less damage, and you're completely immune to every single CC ability. It makes your blade practically uncounterable at that point. The only way they can counter it is to outlive it, which is more possible because of the fact it does less damage, but in most cases you still do enough to kill them. Like, they have to be really tanky to outlive the blade. Just in general, I think there's a lot of things in Stadium that are just too explosive, that have lots of potential, but they either crash and burn aggressively in the space of 2 seconds, or they annihilate an entire lobby. And a lot of those things could really benefit from just chilling out a bit and being a bit more balanced out. And Colossus Core is really good for literally just being a button you hit to balance things out, to say, okay, I have a really cool ability that has loads of potential, but it's just too extreme. Like, I arrive and I'm dead, or I arrive and I kill everyone, but I feel like it's just a coin flip, and it feels like there's so much luck involved in whether it goes well or not. And then you hit Colossus Core, and your consistency just shoots through the roof, at the cost of a little bit of the ceiling of your value. But usually these abilities have such a high ceiling to begin with, you'd just rather have the consistency. From one core to another, though, we then go on to Overdrive Core. Now, this item in particular is one you might be very surprised to see, given that it doesn't have a lot of synergy, and it is typically... I don't know, I'm trying to remember, I don't think I've ever seen a single person in any of my lobbies ever use this item except me. So, what does it do? Oh yeah, you can't check it on there. What does it do? You used to be able to see your items in the practice range on that menu, but they removed the ability. I think because it was buggy, but yeah. Anyway, basically, as you can read here, it gives you 25 shields, because it was in the survival category for 9,500 credits, 25 shields, 10% weapon power, and an ability where once per life, if you take damage that would reduce your maximum health below 30% of the total amount of health, you would instead first gain 300 decaying overhealth to protect yourself and keep yourself alive. So, 300 overhealth, I believe, is about as much as Wu Yang's ultimate. To give you some frame of reference, I think it's 350 or 400 for Wu Yang's ultimate, so we're talking about as much bonus HP as a Wu Yang ult gives you, that activates when you're about to die. And it mentions that it happens first, as in, like, you first gain 300 decaying overhealth. That means that even if you were going to die, like, from something that kills you before you even hit 30% or lower in one hit, it will still give you the overhealth beforehand to protect you as, like, a buffer that just breaks off the damage and make sure you live. So, why is Overdrive Core a good item? Because at first it might seem like a bit of a noob item. Because, I mean, sure, having a bit more health and a bit more damage is great, but it's a bit expensive for that, unless the effect justifies it. But the effect is just, hey, if you were stupid and you were going to die, you get one more chance. And that can seem pretty bad. I mean, to be fair, Geneticist Vial, is Geneticist Vial even still here? Oh my goodness, I never noticed. Oh my god, is Geneticist Vial gone? Oh my goodness, I actually had no idea they removed Geneticist Vial, though I guess it makes sense, because it was a bit of a meme item. Like, it had some genuine slim use cases, but generally it wasn't a great item to take. It made it so that the first time you died each round, you would be resurrected automatically, as if there was a Mercy on your team, and when you came back, you would come back with 150 HP. But it would only trigger once per round, and then never again, and you couldn't choose when, it would just be the first time you died, no matter what. Right, so I guess that kind of dampens this comparison if you didn't know what that item was. But of course, that item wasn't very good generally. Like, again, it had its niche. Occasionally, it could be a pretty clutch pick in the right circumstances. But 90% of the time, it was a desperation pick. And if you could avoid taking it, it was best not to take it. Because it was just terrible in terms of pure stats. This can seem like all the problems with Geneticist Vial all packed into one item, right? It's the same thing. If you're gonna die, it stops you from dying, but it only works once, and the stat boosts it gives you, while not terrible, are pretty bad in terms of cost efficiency. So why am I saying Overdrive Core is underrated? Because there is a critical difference between Geneticist Vial and Overdrive Core. Geneticist Vial activates once per round. Overdrive Core activates once per life. That is a very important difference. Unless you are actually playing inside the pit of lava, you probably aren't dying if this 300 overhealth effect triggers. If you want to simplify why this item is good, then how about I put it this way? Instead of reading the ability as a burst of overhealth when you're about to die that only triggers once per life, think about it this way. Taking this item makes it so that you will die half as many times on this round. If you are going to die 6 times this round, you will instead die 3. If you are going to die 2 times this round, you will instead die 1. Can you see how that might actually be pretty damn good? Especially because it rounds down. Like, if you were going to die 3 times, it would round down to 1. Obviously, I wouldn't really recommend this for a tank. tanks usually are going to be on the front line a whole bunch, and they're going to be in long, drawn-out fights where the 300 over health won't do as much. But if you're playing any character that's looking more to duel and take quick, bursty fights, rather than persistently engage in a never-ending team fight on the front line, then I think, generally speaking, Overdrive Core is a really, really good item that just makes it so you're alive twice as often. The only reason I can't put it higher on this list, because I was tempted to put it higher, is in fairness. When it is possible, it is always kind of just better to just get better stats, you know? If you have the means to get much better survivability so you don't die in the first place, ideally, you want to get much better survivability so you don't die in the first place. If the problem is that you feel you're only dying in the first place because you're not dealing enough damage, then you kind of just want to get more damage. And there's always an argument to be made that this is still a bit of a crutch, even after I've made a solid argument for it, and that generally, if you're a more skillful player, you wouldn't need to rely on it as much. Which I think there is some water to that argument. I do think it's a little bit arrogant to believe you don't need this item. Even if you are a really skilled player, I'm sure there are some circumstances where you should use this item. I think in particular, the main use case that I would argue for this item is when you are currently using a build which has a certain power spike, and you're just short of the credits needed for your power spike. And so you find yourself in this precarious position where you are way behind the power curve of where you should be, just because you can't quite afford those crucial items that make your build come together. If you can afford an Overdrive Core in the meantime, I think an Overdrive Core is a really, really good stand-in item to try and bridge the gap. Because in that period where you are going to be weaker and more susceptible to being picked off because you're just short of your power spike, it helps you stay alive and literally, as I say, die half as often to have twice as much uptime on you being alive and not feeding your brains out when your team really needs you. So yeah, I am a big advocate for Overdrive Core. I think it is a really, really good item. Next up, I got a bit of a wacky one, potentially. And I'll admit, this is one that I've only been experimenting with more recently, so there's a chance that I might be over or underrating it. That being said, I've seen the potential in this item, and I'm starting to realize this could be a demonic item to use if you use it correctly. That being Necrotic Repellent. Now, obviously because we're Tracer, we're getting less health. If we were not Tracer, this would give 50 armor, a 5% cooldown reduction, and its special ability is a 25-second cooldown that allows you to, on use, knock back, hinder, and slow all enemies within 6 meters for 1 second. That is all enemies, to be clear. It's an AoE that affects multiple people if you get the chance. So, the reason why this item is on this list is because I must admit, this is an item I always saw the potential of, but I also myself really didn't use it. A lot of that was just down to the fact that, well, it obviously wants to be used defensively, but a lot of the times I've found most supports that would probably want to use this item defensively can also just be built in a way that they're tanky enough they can outlive dives without needing to rely on a long cooldown that may or may not always be available. So obviously if you really needed it, then sure, you could take Necrotic Repellent to help keep yourself alive on support, but usually most of the supports that would need it to protect themselves would have other options that provide more permanent protection, even if it's not quite as powerful as Necrotic Repellent. I think when it comes to protection, you usually want consistency over power spikes, and so I felt like Necrotic Repellent wasn't necessarily bad, but just hard to justify. And so, even though I fully intended to make good use of it at some point, I kind of went months without really using it at all. Not intentionally, just kind of panned out that way. But one thing always kept in the back of my head. Would you ever potentially use this item not defensively, but offensively? Now, of course, that seems like a really good idea to start, but the main reason why I was a little bit skeptical is because it also knocks people back, which is actually a bit of an inconvenience if you're trying to use it aggressively, because it will usually knock people out of the easy range of your attacks, so it's harder to follow up on them after you hinder them. That being said, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it is well worth it. So, I'm less going to sit here and explain to you why a hinder is good, because it kind of depends on the context, and more just hit you with some characters, and I basically just want to say, hey, can you imagine if you gave this character cast Flashbang? So you can probably guess who the first one I'm going to mention is, Tracer. Need I explain why a Tracer with a hindering Flashbang as an ability is a little terrifying? Like, at least with Cass, if you get hit with the flash, you knew that you're the problem there. You walked into the Cass. But with Tracer, you have a character that can just teleport into your entire team and boom, hinder everyone, and then get a free pulse bomb. Like, what do you do about that? Vendetta has been another character that has been pretty effective with Necrotic Repellent. Funnily enough, mostly as what I would like to call an anti-dive character, in that she can dive herself, but I feel like if you take Necrotic Repellent with her, she adopts this playstyle where, while she can use it aggressively, she can also use it defensively, but still chasing people. Like, if there's a Genji diving your backline, you can, instead of using your mobility to dive the enemy backline, you can use your mobility to chase the Genji, hit the hinder on them so they can't escape, and then, you know, just finish them off while they have no mobility, or at the very least make it so that they have no chance of killing your supports. So Vendetta's been pretty good on that front. Obviously Genji is another character that would definitely benefit from being able to just jump on someone and hinder them and get some free shots. Brig is another character who potentially could get value off of it, although usually Brig is very reliant on another gadget we're going to get to later in this video, so she might not be able to have the room for it, but depending on the circumstances, she might, and you might want to use it. If you're doing some disgusting TP shenanigans that really should get you jailed on Kiriko, then I imagine there is some really gross stuff you could get away with by getting some free kunai headshots by hindering people that you basically just teleport on out of thin air. I'm sure that'll be very fun to play against. Even Moira could get value off of this stuff. She could just appear like a ghost behind you and surprise, you're hindered now. You can't move. Die. Doomfist, Diva, Hazard, you get the idea. There's, oh, and Winston, of course. There are a lot of options for characters that can just drop on you, you can't really do much about it, and then they hinder you, and then they kill you while you're hindered. And it's like, oh, okay, they can just do that. Next up is an item that I must confess I am also guilty of not using as much as I should. Just usually because it's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, and I feel like it's one of those items that's really in the wrong tab. You know, sometimes I see items and I think, is this really where this item belongs? And Sonic Recharger is a great example. Sonic Recharger is a 9,000 cost epic ability item, being the cheapest one, giving you 25 extra health on your health bar, a 10% AP boost, and passive life regeneration gets the ability to overheal up to 75 health over the top of your health bar. This is genuinely really powerful if it worked. Yeah, there we go, it just took a while. There we go. This is genuinely really, really powerful. No joke. And the reason why I say that is because in Stadium, usually, when you pay for an item that gives you more health, if you're paying 9,000, at best you're getting like 50 extra health. You can basically think of this item as, hey, guess what? You paid now 9,000, the cheapest amount you can pay for an epic item, and you got plus 100 health on your health bar. 100 health. Like, for me, I was at 225. This has gotten me basically a 33% boost to my survivability in one item, and it's the cheapest epic item in the game, all while coming bundled with a 10% AP boost. Now, once again, it obviously has the very obvious downside of its overhealth. It can't be healed back, but that's just the thing. That just means don't use it on a character who doesn't want it. Again, tanks probably don't want this because, of course, they want to be healed a whole bunch. They want to take long, sustained team fights. But again, anyone who wants to take more sporadic, duel-y fights where you just like jump on people and you're going on for a quick kill and, you know, you're not really there for a prolonged fight and you're not realistically going to get healed while the fight is going on, this is a really, really good item to have because, I mean, in those situations, there's not really much difference between 100 real health and 100 over health, you know? They basically serve the same purpose and do the same things. If anything, the overhealth is kind of better, because for those of you who didn't know, you get less credits and less ult charge for shooting overhealth. It's halved. So you're quite literally halving the amount of resources the enemy is getting for shooting you, both in terms of credits and ult charge, while also getting an extremely good deal on your survivability. Really, I genuinely think the only reason I don't use this item more is because the main reason you want it is the survivability. The AP cost isn't a great deal. 9,000 for a 10% AP boost is not a good deal if AP is what you care about. And so that leads me to falling into the trap of thinking, okay, I need survivability, and obviously go into the survivability tab and be like, nothing here looks good. In fact, I'm only just remembering now, only a couple days ago, I had a game where I was thinking, man, I wish there was a survivability item in the epic category that gave an AP boost, except for Phantasmic Flux, because of course, you know, that's a lifesteal thing, and I didn't really want to go into lifesteal. I just wanted an item that gives me a decent amount of health and a decent amount of AP. And of course, I was looking here. I wasn't looking here. So yeah, it's very easy to forget this item exists and really underutilize it. But as unassuming as it is, I genuinely think for anyone who isn't a tank and isn't going to be constantly frontlining, or like a Mei, because Mei's basically going to play like a tank, if you're not constantly frontlining, this is just like the best health boost in the game in terms of cost efficiency with a bit of AP bundled in there as well. That's just a really good deal. There's not really much else to it. Next up is an item that I genuinely could have put at number 1 on the list. I was kind of tempted to. In the end, I decided not to, not because I think the item is bad, but because I think at this point it's recognized as powerful as it is. Well, mostly. I still think it's criminally underutilized even now, but at the very least it is utilized now, whereas before I barely saw anyone actually messing around with this item. That being, I say item, it's kind of two. Both dashing skates and jet skates. Now, I used to be more of a fan of dashing skates, although I'm starting to warm up to jet skates now. They're both really good items, they both do the same thing. Most of you already know, but dashing skates and jet skates will make it so you have a new ability added onto your character that allows you to do a little dash. And it's only a small dash, and the cooldown's pretty long at 15 seconds, but ultimately, you would be amazed how many characters become absolute powerhouses and terrifying to deal with the second you add one extra dash they're not supposed to have onto their kit. Like, Brig is obviously the example I'm using here, because I think Brig is a great example of a character that, I don't know what it is, I don't think I've seen any Brigs use this, and I'm like, why not? It is like, if anything, I think Brig is probably the character that gets the most off of this. Brig is amazing with it. But mostly I've seen Annas use it in combination with dash boots, which makes sense. You know, they take the dash boots item, which gives them the little extra dash in the survivability category, and they'll take jet skates and they'll start hopping around like this, you know. Oh, dodge. Oh, I'm going for the dodge. Oh, you're going to dive me? No, you're not. Okay, you're still after me? No, you're not. You know, you get the idea. But I think it's a real shame I only really see Anna players using it, because I think basically everyone can use it. Like, obviously there are definitely characters that get more or less off of it, but like there is almost no character in Stadium that doesn't get a bunch of value from having a bonus dash on their kit. Like, to begin with, every tank in the game, just every tank in the game, like Ramatra loves it, Reinhardt loves it, I even think Sigma loves it, Junker Queen loves it, Hazard loves it, Winston, actually probably Winston doesn't need it because he's got such extreme mobility on his own if you take the, that's kind of funny. I think Winston might be the only one who I think doesn't need it, because if you take 0G suit, you can just do, well, this. And I think that's, you know, that already makes your mobility kind of good enough. You kind of don't need the leap. But yeah, Winston's probably the only one I could think of, because even Doomfist, I thought initially Doomfist wouldn't care about it, but Doomfist is actually pretty good with it, because of the fact that you can do shenanigans like this. Like, I can start charging my punch behind this wall, and then hop out like that, and they don't see it coming. That makes it so that even Doomfist actually gets quite a lot. Oh, quite a lot off of the dash ability, just because it gives them insane mix-up potential. So yeah, it used to be that I was more of a fan of dashing skates, because I just looked at the options, and dashing skates is more than twice as cheap as jet skates for the same ability on a bit of a longer cooldown, but it also gives 25 health and a 5% move speed boost. Now 5% isn't a lot, but move speed is a deeply coveted stat in Stadium. In fact, dashing skates, except maybe there might be some like character-specific items that break this pattern, but I think if you're not counting those, dashing skates is the cheapest move speed boost in the game. It is like that is without the ability. So move speed boost is an extremely coveted stat in Stadium. Having a move speed boost is one of the best stat boosts you can have in the game. So even a 5% move speed boost is actually really good. And having a 5% move speed boost with a dash, with a health boost for this cheap is insanely good. This is actually probably like, I would go as far as to say that dashing skates might be the best item in all of Stadium. I'm not even kidding. Like, oh my god, man, it's kind of just an auto-lock for almost every character in the game. But I was less fond of jet skates because it's more upfront cost, and sure, it has a reduced cooldown, but while it still gives health, I kind of didn't like that it gave weapon power and ability power instead of move speed. I know that obviously these are still decent boosts, and probably worth more than 5% move speed, but honestly not a lot more to me. So at first, I wasn't so big on jet skates. The cooldown reduction is nice, but that's about it. Now, I know we've had a lot of wild and wacky items, but I'm going to be honest, for our number 2 spot, we actually have a very mundane one. But one that I think is criminally underrated. Like, part of me is thinking, is it really that underrated? But then I remember, oh wait, I don't think I've seen anyone use this except myself. Which is crazy, because this has become probably the single most common item that I take round 1 across all characters. And I'm not even kidding. That item being Barrier Snippet. Barrier Snippet is a simple item. It gives you 25 extra health on your health bar, and it gives you the gadget ability that every 35 seconds you can activate it to get 50 over health. Lasts a couple seconds and eventually goes away. That's it. Now, I know that might seem like it's not that great. Let's compare it to the other popular item that most people prefer to go for. If you look in the survivability category, most people would rather spend that money in the early game on an armored vest, because armor's better than health, right? I mean, this just gives boring old normal health. This gives armor. So, I've done this spiel a bunch of times, and it's a bit long-winded, so I'm going to try and keep this short. Long story short, armor's damage reduction is variable. It isn't always the same, and it depends on how frequently the hits come. If you are dealing with something that hits you multiple times a second, or something like a shotgun, then it will deal its maximum damage reduction of 50% damage reduction. If you are dealing with big, slow hits, it will do much less. If it's a worst-case scenario, the worst it can do is it will only mitigate 7 damage in total, making 25 armor effectively worth 32 HP against big, slow hits. That's all completely ignoring that most beam attacks also completely ignore armor entirely, in which case it's just 25 HP. So yeah, let's put it that way. Armored Vest is essentially a 50 HP boost versus things like Tracer, Reaper, or Junker Queen, a 32 HP boost versus characters like Ashe, Junkrat, or Freya, and a 25 HP boost with no upside versus someone like a Mei, a Moira, or a Zarya. Let's compare that to Barrier Snippet. You get the 25 baseline, but you also get this ability, and this ability is 50 extra overhealth. That is just 75 HP. Like, that's just 75 HP for the same cost. Need I say more? If you buy armor, you're getting 50 HP in a best case scenario. In a lot of cases, you're only getting 25 or 32. Whereas if you buy this, you're just getting 75. Like, you're getting, on average, probably about double the health value out of this item than you are from Armored Vest. And that's not even to say Armored Vest is bad. There's a reason Armored Vest is popular. It is good, and it's easy to use. But if you're just willing to press one extra button, Barrier Snippet, it's really good. It's just literally double health value, maybe even triple, compared to what is otherwise considered the best early game health item in the game. Now, I know there's the obvious elephant in the room, that cooldown. 35 seconds is a really long cooldown, and you might be thinking, I mean, you're just gonna die in that time period. But here's the thing, unless you are playing a tank, and once again, if you're playing a tank, don't buy survivability items at the start of the game, because tanks don't get a lot of benefit from them. Unless you are playing a tank, you really shouldn't be in a position where you need 50 extra HP to not die more than once every 35 seconds. Like, I know 35 seconds probably sounds like a really long time, and it would be for a cooldown that you actually need to execute your game plan. But think of it like this. It's a second life, which I know I'm stretching a little bit here. Obviously, 50 HP is not always going to save your life. But if we're talking early game, in my experience, 50 HP actually is pretty often the difference between life and death. If you do use this before you die, which you will in almost every case, so long as you don't just sit there and not press the button, or you get one shot, but at the early game, there's not many things that will true one-shot you, obviously. There's a lot of two-shots, but there's not a lot of one-shots. There's at least a window to hit the Barrier Snippet. So long as you hit the Barrier Snippet, it's kind of a second life that regenerates every 35 seconds. And when you put it like that, it's pretty damn good. Like, I'm kind of still weirded out by the fact that no one uses it. It's so good, and it's so easy to use. You just press the button when you're getting hurt. It even has this nice little bonus, where, obviously, because it's overhealth, it can't be negated by anti-heal. And on top of that, overhealth always goes on the top of your health bar, so it can also be used to protect armor health if you're playing a character that has armor health already, and you want to preserve that because you're currently receiving healing. As well as that, it does last barely long enough that, in my experience, if you're about to do something scary, and you're worried that you might die the second you do it, it is pretty easy to just hit the button just before you go in. Like, for instance, if you're going to go for a Dragon Blade on Genji, but you know that you're going to get focused the second that you, like, you know, go in there, like, you're just going to get exploded immediately, you can pretty consistently use the Barrier Snippet as soon as you arrive to ensure that you go in with the 50 bonus health straight away, rather than having to try and mash the button mid-fight and react to taking damage while also doing your Dragon Blade. Usually, you'll use up the 50 overhealth if you're actually getting focused anyway before the 3 seconds are up, so yeah, genuinely, super underrated item in my opinion. Like, literally, I take it round one almost every single game on almost every single character. But that brings us to what is truly the most underrated item in Stadium. Except, I cheated a little. I picked 2 again. Though this one's a bit of a stretch. At the very least, when I did jet skates and dash skates, or whatever it was, the dashing skates, I nearly got it. Those are obviously basically the same item. Here, I'll admit, I'm stretching a little bit. These items hold one thing in common, but nominally do different things. So you could say these don't really belong in the same spot. At the end of the day, though, I'm putting them in this spot for a similar reason, and especially because one of them is a lot weirder than the other, you'll see.
I feel like it fits to put both of them here. You can be mad at me in the comments if you want. Cushion padding and Kitsune Charm. Cushion padding is the one I want to focus... That's the wrong tab. Cushion padding is the one that I want to focus on the most, because this is the more cheap and affordable one and the more consistent option, even though it won't have quite as high highs as Kitsune Charm. I always want to call it Kitsune Snippet. That's a different gadget. Cushion padding is an item that grants you 25 shields for 3,750 credits, while also providing a 40% reduction to the duration of all debuffs that you receive. This also gives you a third benefit on top of all that, of giving you 10% of your health back over the next 3 seconds whenever you are affected by stun, sleep, or hinder. Already, it's pretty good to have some sort of resistance to being stunned or slept or CC'd in general. And already, the fact that you can get 10% of your health back for getting stunned allows you to survive getting sleep darted, getting rocked, getting speared, getting punched way more often. Already, cushion padding would be an okay item if it was just that effect. But the real reason cushion padding is on the #1 spot for the single most underrated item in Stadium is because of that minus 40% incoming negative effect duration. I do not think the player base, even the top players in the player base, because from what I've seen, a lot of high-ranked players aren't using this item, I do not think they understand what that actually means. I think people get that it means you're stunned for less time, although I do want to emphasize already just the stun reduction I think is kind of underrated. It is insane how much faster you recover from being stunned. 40% might not sound like a lot, it feels like a lot though. Christ, when you have this item, it feels like stuns don't do anything to you. You just shrug them off and keep going. That already is kind of good enough. But this also applies to other debuffs. For example, if you are anti-healed, this will make the anti-heal wear off nearly twice as fast, which is a pretty damn good effect to have on a tank. But we're not even done yet. Do you want to know the real reason why this is here? Damage over time counts as a negative effect. I feel like most people don't understand how broken that is in the context of Stadium. Like, let me put it this way. If you pick this item versus a Junker Queen, it may as well say Junker Queen does 40% less damage and heals 40% less. I'm serious. If you get wounded and you have this item, the wounds wear off nearly twice as fast, which means the amount of damage they deal is nearly halved, which also means the amount of healing they provide the Queen is also basically halved, which also means that if she has the power where she shares her healing with her teammates, which Junker Queens usually do, that shared healing is also basically halved. That's just Junker Queen. This one item, this 3,750 credit item, basically nukes Junker Queen just for taking it already. That's just Queen. But you might be thinking, okay, so Queen gets nuked, but whatever. I mean, how many damage over time effects really are there in Stadium? Oh, you want to find out? Let's start with burn effects, because I'm not sure if you noticed, there are a lot of characters in Stadium that can give their abilities the ability to set people on fire for bonus damage over time. So D.Va has the boosters one, Doomfist has one for his punch, Orisa has the overheat one that sets people on fire, Reinhardt has the one where every third hammer swing sets people on fire. Rametra doesn't really have a burn, but he does have the infection power, which I believe counts. Ashe just has dynamite in general, though even if she's not a dynamite Ashe build, weapon power Ashe likes to take the one that makes people burn on headshot, which would also be reduced. Speaking of burn on headshot, burn on direct hit from Junkrat also gets reduced. The bleed from Genji Dash would also receive a reduction. Burns from Briggs Whip Shot would receive a reduction. And of course, I'll admit this one's a little less relevant, but if you're discorded by Zenyatta, then the time it will take for the orb to break off of you when you break line of sight will be nearly twice as fast. And again, on top of all that, remember that at any point, if anyone decides to take either Cyber Venom or Liquid Nitrogen, both very popular items, you are going to be reducing their effectiveness by 40%. Just because you took this cheap survival item that also gives you health, that also makes you heal 10% of your health back whenever you get CC'd. Like, my god, man. Cushion padding is a powerhouse of an item, but it's kind of depressing to me that it seems like it only sees very, very, very niche usage occasionally from tanks that are getting CC'd a bunch. And don't get me wrong, it's good against CC, but I feel like it's not even best used against CC. I think it's best used against damage over time, because there's just way more damage over time effects in the game, and this is literally 40% damage resistance versus damage over time. 40%! That is insane! That's about as much as Fortify provides Orisa, and you just have that permanently versus damage over time effects. And there are so many of them in Stadium. And you think I'm done? Oh, wait until you hear this gem. Do you remember Nebula Conduit? You don't see this item as much nowadays, but it still has its uses every now and then. It's an epic survival item, costs 11,000, gives 50 health, 5% weapon power, and it makes it so that 15% of the incoming damage that you take will instead be dealt as a damage over time that takes 3 seconds to apply, meaning that you get to take some of the damage you are supposed to take in the future to give people more time to heal you and sustain through the damage. Okay then, why am I talking about Nebula Conduit? Well, guess what? It's a damage over time effect. So guess what? I labbed this, and if you take cushion padding, it makes it so that not only do you take 15% of the damage you're supposed to take in the future, if you combine it with Nebula Conduit, you actually don't even take the 15% damage, because it gets reduced by 40%, and instead you only have to take 9% damage. And if you really wanted to, you could stack that with Kitsune Charm for an 80% reduction to negative effects, and an 80% resistant to DOT, to make it so that you just have a flat 12% damage resistance at all times, and you only have to take 3% of the damage in the future. Oh, speaking of which, just while we're here, as if Kiriko wasn't broken enough in this mode, do you want to know something really funny? You see this power cleansing charge? When you cleanse negative effects with Protection Suzu, gain 5% ultimate charge for each hero cleansed. I used to be a bit of a skeptic on this power, but I've realised it's actually insane, mostly because Kitsune Rush is the most broken ultimate in the game and has been since day one, and getting it faster is really, really good. But, if you want to make this even crazier, if I get Nebula Conduit right now, oh, wait, why do I basically already have my ultimate? Wait, let me just cast that to get rid of it. See, I'm taking damage. I cleansed it and I got a 5% ult charge boost. Every Suzu is just 5% free ult charge minimum. That is really, really, really good. So, yeah, you can make it so you not only get the heal boost for cleansing a debuff, because Suzu heals more if you cleanse a debuff, you not only get to not take the rest of that 15% of the damage in the future, you just don't even have to do it. You also get an ult charge boost for it, and usually the main downside of this power is that you can't always guarantee that your teammates are going to be debuffed or have something to cleanse off of them. But with Nebula Conduit, you can make it so that as long as you have taken damage in the last 3 seconds, you always have something to cleanse, because you can always just cleanse yourself and get 5% ult charge for free for every single Suzu. Like, oh my god, man. So, okay, I've talked a lot about specifically cushion padding, but let me come back around to Kitsune Charm. So Kitsune Charm is put in the same bucket because despite being a lot more expensive, it has a similar effect. 50 shields, it has the same 40% reduction against incoming negative effects, and it has the 20-second cooldown bonus ability that you can cleanse yourself and restore 75 life, gaining invulnerability and a 75% move speed boost for 2/3 of a second, which looks like this. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. The main reason why this is bundled in with cushion padding is because there's a two-way street here. I think, theoretically speaking, Kitsune Charm is the single most broken item to be in Stadium. Like, I really do think that. Like, I guess I said dashing skates maybe earlier. I want to underline the theoretically here. I think, in theory, in a perfect world where everyone plays Stadium like robots and they are just, like, insanely good and they never make a mistake, Kitsune Charm to me seems like it should be the single best item in all of Stadium. With that said, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't pick it a lot. And it's not because I don't think it's good. I fully believe it's insane. But we just have to address the elephant in the room. You might notice there's a lot of gadgets on this list. There's a reason people don't play with gadgets. And it's not actually that they suck. Like, don't get me wrong. There are definitely gadgets that suck. But, like, there's a lot of gadgets that are actually really strong and really underrated. The main reason why people don't use gadgets, though, I don't really think is because they don't know that gadgets can be good. I think it's because no one actually wants to bother with using the gadget button. Because, I mean, as you can see, for me, it's 3 on the keyboard. That is the best key I have available for it. And it's not really a great key to use. Like, don't get me wrong, it works. But no one wants to have a crucial ability that is important to their character be stuck on 3 on the keyboard. At the very least, most of the gadgets that I've covered today don't require absolutely impeccable timing with it. And so if timing isn't all that important, the fact that it's a slightly awkward button isn't the end of the world. But then there's Kitsune Charm. It's a Suzu. It's a self-directed Suzu, but it's a Suzu. And I've mentioned before, Suzu is the most broken cooldown in this entire game, and it has been for years. Like, Suzu is literally better than half of the ultimates in this game on a cooldown, which is ridiculous. So, obviously, a self-Suzu that anyone can get at any moment with only a 20-second cooldown that comes bundled with DOT resistance and, you know, just general debuff resistance that also comes with a bunch of extra health on your health bar is insanely good, stupidly good for the cost. But are you actually going to hit a good self-Suzu if the Suzu button requires you to do spider movements with your hand to reach it? Like, it is really important to time your Suzus well. And usually, when I'm talking about Kiriko, I downplay the amount of skill it takes to hit time Suzus correctly, because I do stand by the idea that I do not believe that timing Suzus is a very difficult skill. It's a skill, but it's a pretty basic skill. After a little bit of practice, it is pretty damn easy against most things in the game to time your Suzus. Obviously, there's some exceptions, especially when enemies have an opportunity to mix up the timing. Something like a Junkrat tire is very difficult to Suzu, because the Junkrat can detonate at any time, you know? This would be much, much harder to hit with a Suzu, I acknowledge, but most attacks in the game, you know, like a Rocket Barrage, like an Earth Shatter, stuff like that, they're relatively easy to Suzu. But a lot of that is because Suzu's on a convenient button you can just easily hit right next to where your fingers are already playing the game with. And then there's this. If you have to spider hands your way over to the keyboard to the button you need to press to use the Kitsune charm, it makes it way harder to actually time it correctly and use it to its fullest potential. At some point, I'm genuinely planning of just locking in and basically forcing myself to use this gadget a bunch, and for a while I'm probably going to make terrible use of it just because I can never hit the button in time because I have to move my hand too much. But I'm going to at some point need to lock in and learn how to use this gadget, because I really do believe if you could get someone who can comfortably hit the gadget button and hit the timings correctly while still playing the rest of the character like effectively, that this item is more broken than anything else in Stadium. I already explained why the debuff resistance is extremely underrated and powerful. I think 50 HP is actually not even a bad deal for an item of this cost as well. And obviously the cooldown itself, just insane. Self-Suzu on a 20-second cooldown is ridiculous. I can't believe we live on that planet. So yeah, those are my picks for the single most underrated items in all of Stadium as it is right now. Again, I did leave out some hero-exclusive items just for the sake of simplicity. Although, in fairness, I think most hero-exclusive items tend to see a lot of play as well, just for the sake of curiosity. You know, people tend to have their eyes drawn to hero-specific items, so a lot of them are less underrated in the first place. That being said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.